By day, he was a softly spoken chocolate factory worker. By night, he was a monster from hell who tortured young men and ate them. Today's story is about a notorious serial killer and cannibal, Jeffrey Dahmer.
I'm mad. This is how you act when you are out of control. I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you, mother. I hate you. This is out of control. Don't me, Jeffrey. I'll kill you. Look at me.
Jeffrey was born in 1960 and grew up in a small town in Ohio. There was no evidence that Jeffrey was severely mistreated or abused as a child. He was a well-educated, middle-class boy. Jeffrey's mother suffered from depression and spent most of her time in bed, and even tried to commit suicide once. His father, a PhD chemist, was a very busy man, and he would spend most of his time at work. But Jeffrey's parents didn't have a very healthy relationship. Jeffrey would watch his parents fight almost every day. He started feeling neglected and isolated, and this isolation made Jeffrey interested in animals, but in a really strange way. When he was 8 years old, he found a dead dog that was hit by a car on the side of the road. He had this urge to see what's inside of it, so he brought it back home with him and started cutting the dog open and looking at its insides. That became a habit for Jeffrey. He would walk around the countryside looking for roadkills to add to his collection of bones and dead animals. Jeffrey discovered he was attracted to boys, and as a teenager, he was harassed by others. And as Jeffrey turned 18, his parents split, which affected him a lot. As a result, that fascination of collecting bones and dead animals turned from animals to humans. Jeffrey's first victim was Steven, an 18-year-old hitchhiker who was on his way to a festival. Jeffrey picked him up, convinced him to come home with him and have several drinks before driving him to that festival, and Steven agreed. Little did he know he was never going to make it to that festival. It was getting late, and Steven didn't want to miss that festival, so he told Jeffrey that he needed to leave, but Jeffrey refused. He was feeling lonely and he really wanted Steven to stay. So when Jeffrey tried to stop Steven from leaving, a fight broke out, and all of a sudden, Jeffrey grabbed a dumbbell and whacked Steven over the head. Then he used the body for his sexual gratification, dissected it and cut it into small parts and put them in black plastic bags to dispose of them. And while he was driving to get rid of these plastic bags, he was stopped by the police for a minor traffic ticket. But one of the officers flashed his light inside the car, just like any officer would do, and noticed the 5 plastic bags. He asked Jeffrey about them, and he said that they were garbage bags, and he was on his way to throw them away. The officers believed him, gave him the ticket, and drove away. But instead of throwing the body parts, he stripped the bones of their flesh and dissolved what he could in acid, and the rest was flushed down the toilet. Then he crushed the bones with a sledgehammer and threw the fragments in the woods. Jeffrey joined the US Army when he turned 19, but because of his persistent drinking and the reports of him drugging and molesting soldiers while stationed in Germany, he was discharged from the army. 9 years later, Jeffrey would kill again, and after that, he was unable to stop. Jeffrey moved to Milwaukee and stayed with his grandmother, hoping she would be able to guide him out of the darkness. He went to church with her every Sunday. He didn't do anything homosexual, and he really believed that religion would put him on the right track. And for a while, it worked. He was able to control his urges. But that turned out to be more like the calm before the storm. One day, Jeffrey was at the library when a guy threw a crumbled piece of paper in front of him, telling Jeffrey to follow him to the men's room. Jeffrey didn't meet up with that guy, but after that incident, Jeffrey said that was when things started falling apart for him. In 1985, Jeffrey started going to gay bathhouses where he would target young men, drug them, and have sexual intercourse with them. No one pressed charges, so Jeffrey was never arrested. But when word got out that he was drugging men, he was banned from any local homosexual hangouts. So instead, he started luring men to hotel rooms. On August 1988, Jeffrey had already killed 4 men, but his 5th victim managed to escape. The cops were called and Jeffrey was arrested for molesting a 13-year-old boy. But at this point, the authorities were unaware of his previous gruesome crimes, so he was only sentenced to 12 months in a low-security prison, but was released early on probation. Jeffrey moved out of his grandmother's house to live in his own apartment, where he would continue committing his heinous crimes. He would pick up young men from gay bars, and he was considered a nice-looking man. He was well-spoken, and he even told jokes, so it was easy for him to attract others, or, in other words, manipulate them. After killing his victims and having sexual activity with them, Jeffrey would cut them open and dismember the bodies. He even sometimes kept parts of the body, mostly the head, in his apartment for days. Jeffrey didn't stop. He couldn't stop. He killed more, and as his addiction got worse, he took more risks. But all of that was not enough for him. Jeffrey wanted to satisfy himself even more, which was by eating his victims. He said that made him feel like the person he killed and ate became part of him, and that he wasn't alone anymore. And don't think he stopped there. Jeffrey took it to a whole nother level. He tried a new technique where he would drill a hole in his victim's skull, and with a syringe he would fill it with hydraulic acid, putting his victims in a zombie-like state. And in that way, he didn't have to kill anymore. He tried that method on a 14-year-old boy. Jeffrey left the boy alone on the couch in his apartment, went to a bar and drank some beer. But the boy managed to get up, open the door, walk down the hall, and leave the apartment building. When Jeffrey came back, he saw the boy sitting on the sidewalk with 3 girls who called the police. Jeffrey freaked out a bit, but calmed himself and tried to come up with a story. He approached the officers and asked them what's going on. They told him what happened. Then, Jeffrey explained to them that the boy is his boyfriend. He was drunk, they had a fight, and he tripped, which explains the bloody head. The officers then asked Jeffrey, how old is he? Jeffrey answered, 18. Then, they asked him about his ID, but Jeffrey told them that he lost it. The cops believed Jeffrey's story, helped him walk the boy back to his apartment, and left. Jeffrey then ejected the boy again, trying to put him back in that zombie-like state, but ended up killing him. At this point, still, no one suspected anything. The man who brought an end to Jeffrey Dahmer's reign was a 32-year-old man named Tracy Edwards. Jeffrey lured Tracy to his apartment. He unsuccessfully tried to handcuff him. Tracy noticed the horrible smell and a huge barrel, and that was when he freaked out and knew he had to talk his way out of this. After buying himself some time, Tracy punched Jeffrey in the face when he had the chance and made a run for it. He was running down the street when he saw a passing police car and told the officers that Jeffrey had threatened to kill him. And when they went to check Jeffrey's apartment, one officer found the pictures that Jeffrey took of his dead victims. He noticed that the pictures were real and were taken in the exact same room that they were standing in. Then he yelled to his partner to grab Jeffrey. They found in his apartment a human head in the refrigerator. Both the eyes and the mouth were wide open. 2 plastic bags in the freezer, each containing a human heart that Jeffrey had planned to eat. In his bedroom, they found 7 skulls, 4 more human heads, and a complete skeleton, Polaroids documenting the dismemberments. And finally, a 57-gallon barrel filled with acid. Inside it were 3 torsos, as well as other body parts. Jeffrey revealed that he murdered 17 young men between 1978 and 1991. And on the 17th of February 1992, Jeffrey was sentenced to life in prison and was named the Milwaukee Cannibal. But the real question is, how was he able to get away with his crimes for more than a decade? There were multiple times Jeffrey almost got caught, but somehow he managed to convince the cops that everything is fine and that there's nothing to worry about every single time. And when he was arrested the first time for molesting a 13-year-old boy, he got out on probation, but not once he was visited by the probation officer or was given a surprise visit. Investigators also discovered that neighbors had been complaining for a long period of time about a horrible smell and weird sounds coming from Jeffrey's apartment, but no one looked into it or did anything about it. His neighbor, though, once confronted him about it. He told her that his refrigerator broke and that the meat went bad and he forgot to get rid of it, and that what was causing the smell. In 1993, 2 inmates were bludgeoned to death by a man called Christopher with a dumbbell. One of these inmates was 34-year-old Jeffrey Dahmer. After investigating, they've discovered that Jeffrey didn't put up a fight. He didn't have defense marks like the other inmate that was killed had. It was like he accepted his death. But what was interesting is that Jeffrey was killed with a dumbbell, which what he used to kill his very first victim.